Hello and welcome to this month's RV podcast. With us today is Vic.
Hello.
Marv.
Hello.
The debut of Marv, and this is an actual follow-up to the last podcast, something we couldn't really do the last time we gave this a shot, back in 2015. We're already making quite the improvement.
And hopefully we are going to keep at it.
Yeah, I found the last one very, very enjoyable.
Until it wasn't.
Until it wasn't. How was it not?
Well, constantly being like, oh man, can't record it, this time. Oh, let's try another time. And also for like a year. Yeah, that didn't...
Oh, no, I mean the last time. The last podcast. I listened to it on a train ride and yeah.
Did you follow the damn train?
Well, I was sitting in it, so I did.
Nice. So, we had quite a bit of stuff last month. Primarily... actually, let's have a look. Because I don't have the October thing pinned, because I'm stupid. But there was the Halloween Carnival, so that was a thing that happened.
Yeah, and I think it was quite a blast for me, personally. The races, just regular IO races, but I think the highlight, in my opinion, was the custom content that was submitted, and
oh yeah, tell me about it. Yeah, we had races, and then we had a beauty contest. Chili won the races by a long shot. Shara tried to mount a challenge, so did I, but I got sort of burnt out towards the second session, so yeah.
As for the beauty contest, it ended up with a tie between my car and Kiwi's, followed up by Mighty Cucumber's car and Shara's car. So Shara actually made the podium twice.
Yeah, the top four very much in a completely different league to the other four cars. Like, Meat Grinder looks nice, but all the eyeballs kind of make it look a bit bizarre, to put it lightly. Then we have Frisk's Creation.
Let's not forget your beautiful illusion on wheels.
Illusion on wheels with my face on the wheels.
Lovely.
Yes, good old illusion. Illusion on wheels. It's a shame I didn't get to drive it on Illusion itself. That would have been quite the illusion.
So the car was actually the track on wheels.
Yes.
The model of the track. Oh my
yes.
god. I could not make that out. What?
I wonder how many actually did. Because I figure a lot of people haven't actually noticed that.
You see, I'm sure people near me, when they used batteries or zaps, they noticed that their ENV wouldn't work as well. Because, as it turns out, Illusion has, despite its simplistic mesh, still has quite the bit of a poly count, like a couple thousand.
Yeah. I actually saw that as well, because I had a similar idea for Allsphere, but never actually did it.
See, that's a good thing. You can put your bootleg ideas into these smaller non-Allsphere related... you have these Allsphere related events, so you can put your stupid ideas into there and then save the good stuff for Allsphere itself.
Yeah. But, yeah, if anyone wants to see the cars for themselves, check out the blog on Revolt.io, because we have the downloads for the cars there, as well as the tracks.
So yeah, we had the Halloween Carnival, we had, obviously, the Hot Lap competition concluded, with Andor taking the grand prize of €20 worth of Steam games. Alex actually won the Hot Lap competition, but as he said, if he gets number 1, number 2 will get the prize. So, yeah, there was a lot of competition there. We also had the Drift Pack update. A lot of tracks were removed and even more tracks were added. We had Warehouse Showdown by Paint Art. We had Daybreak Raceway and the 4 Sideways Sanctuaries track added by yours truly. We had 3 tracks removed though. We had Malvern GP removed, Drift Under Hood removed, and Canyon of the Walls, I think. Yeah, it's been a while, but that's what we did with the Drift Pack. So, there's still some fine-tuning to do, and obviously there are talks of turning it into a general circuit pack rather than strictly a drifting pack. So
it might be better, so
it'd be more inclusive to do that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not against it. Like, I like the a more focused pack towards drifting, but having it more inclusive and including just general circuits on it isn't bad either.
Sorry.
So yeah, that's basically October in a nutshell. Now then, for this month, last month actually, we had a new RVGL update out of literally nowhere, which added a couple of features. If we have a look at that, got all the scrolling. Yeah, we have SVG support, which similarly grabs a vector and rasterizes it. So it's not quite working as people assumed it would.
Well, it's not a feature in RVGL. It's just due to SDL2 images support that has been introduced. So it's not actually optimized for RVGL, but you can make it work by having the exact size of the image, and then it works okay.
Yeah. We also have spark generators that can be disabled, which will prove to be very valuable if you have a very old machine and want to race Sparvolt.
Yeah, exactly, because the particles have to be rendered with transparency, and that's very heavy on older graphics solutions. So.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Especially phones. So. Yeah.
What are those?
What is a phone?
Phoner.
So, I think Hookie is actually intending... he didn't actually include it in the latest update, did he? With the new letters.
UTF-8 support? No, not
yes.
yet. But, the game now fully supports UTF-8. That means you can play the game in many more languages, or you're able to translate the game into those languages in the first place. Many of the characters are still being approximated, like using similar signs. So if you have an A with some symbol on top of it, it'll just use the closest thing to it. So it loads the languages, doesn't display them as accurately as possible, but that's going to come in the future.
I feel like transitioning away from an image file for the fonts to an actual font file would be the best inclusive solution.
Yes, for sure.
From what I understand, Hookie is actually intending to do that, at least for more special characters. But it might be cool to have the default font as well to use for other things.
I mean, it's not a special font. It should be pretty easy to replicate.
But will RVGL have emoji support?
Are emojis in UTF-8? I think so, yeah.
Will we able to spam the cowboy emoji in the middle of a race?
Oh my god. I mean, technically it would be possible, yes, but
And
I
what
don't know.
about the future? What does the future hold for RVGL aside from, features?
Aside from the future, or what are you asking?
Well, I'm just rambling there. Well, basically, we know what's we know what's currently going on with RVGL with the new experimental and other kinds of supports for things. But is there anything else worthwhile to talk about for the future?
In terms of RVGL, on my side, there's not much progress because I started uni again, and yeah, I didn't have much time to work on anything. What I would like to at least introduce in the future is custom championships, so you can define your own championships. Yeah, it shouldn't be too much work left to be done, but yeah, I just need to find the time. I need larger chunks of time to dedicate to RVGL to kind of get back on track. So that's my main problem. And in terms of what Yuki is doing, he's doing a lot of technical stuff. The UTF-8 support.
So it's like
what's
like
next.
Huki does the more technical backdoor aspects of the game, and you focus more on the features.
On the features. I wouldn't exactly phrase it that way, but I focus on things that are, for me at least, easier to do, or structural changes, support for file types. That's more my kind of thing. Yuki knows basically everything what's going on in every single line of code, and I have to figure out what's going on where, and then work on one part of the game that I slowly try to start to understand, and then implement new things there.
Yeah.
On the forums, there are a lot of suggestions for RVGL. How many of those do you expect to actually be implemented given enough time?
Given enough time, I would like to implement all of them because they're all justified. Many of them shouldn't be too hard to implement, but some require larger changes to the code base and the game structure. And I don't know. Depends. With enough time, everything could be implemented, but...
And there's a lot of ideas and changes that are talked about, which would be appreciated but might divide the community. For example, some people would want the car limit increased.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a very tricky thing to talk about, because some people would be like, yeah, let's do it. And others would be like, 16 cars already wants to make me smash my keyboard in an online race. What will 20 do? What will 30 do? Another thing is dedicated servers.
Yes, dedicated servers would be awesome. There have been projects that kind of accomplish that, so ideally people would just continue work on that. What's missing is cheat detection and stuff that's very specific to RVGL, like the verification of cars and comparing them. That's one thing that would need to be implemented. But apart from that, I hope it's going to be there in the near future, but I'm not working on it myself at the moment, but maybe some people can team up, and if they need any help or any information about the inner workings of RVGL, the network code, they can approach us and we can figure out a way to share the necessary information to get them set up to come up with a solution.
Yeah, which brings me back to a lot of people wishing that the project was open source, not realizing why it's not entirely open source in the first place.
Yeah. Basically, it's just that's a difficult point. I would like to open source it myself. Well, the problem is, of course, licensing. We do have the license to distribute RVGL, the patch, and decide what we do with it. But we wouldn't really like, the license owners to do shady things with the code or, publish it themselves, and then, support would basically fall back onto us, which we can't do. If the game gets too big, we'll have problems with community management, game lobby management.
Not to mention the millions of different types of distributions which could potentially happen.
Yeah.
Because we've sort of had something like this in the past, back in 2014, when the community was bickering between 6 different types of versions of the game to use.
Yeah.
And if RVGL was open sourced, that could potentially become even worse if the right people were around to capitalize on the code. Not to mention the legalities regarding the IP holders of the original game, but that's a completely different killer fish.
Exactly.
Another feature, which a small handful of people are talking about, are the people who like to time trial the game. Time trialing around tracks. And a lot of people, well, this is basically just me, why not just grab Trackmania and just slap it into RV, have an online time trial mode?
Yes, I would love that. I did a proof of concept, kind of a very, very dirty implementation of it, and it basically worked, but it kind of made the entire thing too bulky. You need to insert so many lines of code in different places because the game modes aren't like centralized, one game mode per file, but one file with all game modes in there. That means if you add another game mode, you're going to make the code files even longer and everything becomes spaghetti.
So what you're saying is the code would need to be heavily restructured before that was even possible?
It is possible easily, but if you do
possible,
that,
but it would be better to restructure the code first before adding in extra game modes.
Yes, I would like that, and I think one of the best options would be modding support, or maybe
with
moving the entire thing to a new, base with more modern programming paradigms like object-oriented stuff. So you would have less code duplications.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, I would love to implement all these things, but I'm kind of lacking the time to grasp an overview of where things need to go.
And then that combined with your lack of free time and whatnot makes
Exactly.
things very difficult.
Yeah.
I know that Hyuki has his hands full with a lot of stuff. We don't even know what he does in real life. He could be, I don't know, building a Taj Mahal in his backyard or something. As they say, maybe grabbing people's bank account details, like in the good old days of 2011. I don't know, we could cut that out. Anyhow. In any case, another thing to talk about is what's next after the Halloween Carnival. And the answer is...
I think it's All's Fair.
All's Fair 6.
All's Fair 6. Yeah. So, for me, I think it would be best if it's in December, because this month I'm pretty much booked.
And I'll have to agree with that.
Well, that completely goes against the topics that we wanted to talk about. Because, Vic, you wanted to, have a Christmas championship or something. and have Allsfair this month. But if December would be more convenient for you too, and I'm not going to lie, December would be convenient for all of us, then, just have Allsfair 6 then.
Christmas All Fair, I think, maybe.
So I guess what we want to say is that though All's Fair was initially planned for this month, we are probably going to delay it a bit until the first or second week of December.
But the good news is that frees up a potential tournament for this month, which I've only just found out right now, which, anything could be done. Now, I don't know, throw together a 1v1 tourney or a Vault Ball tourney, because Vault Ball was a concept which was explored, a lot of people liked it, and then it just suddenly disappeared.
I think this is actually a good opportunity to say that you guys could vote for what to host this month in terms of a tournament. We might do a poll later on.
Because let's face it, last time I tried holding a tournament based on what I felt was good enough, didn't quite happen, to put it lightly. So yeah, that's our plans tournaments wise for this month, and I suppose next month as well. And then we have a couple of changes, plans, and new additions to make to the RVIO packs. And one of the biggest surprises is the potential of having Super Pro cars in the pack.
Yes. At the moment, we gathered up quite a few. I don't know exactly what the count is, but we are going to have a few special events over the next few weeks to test out the idea. If it goes well and people like it, we might actually implement this class into the regular casual IO sessions, meaning Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. So, keep an eye on the schedule and see if you'd like to join us.
And if you want a sneak peek of how Super Pro cars will fare in terms of pace, your best bet is to download, absolutely not a shameless plug whatsoever, download Yinisa from RVZ,
as well as
made by yours truly.
As well as La Rosa, I think it was.
Oh yeah, La Rosa's out.
Yeah.
Made by Zark and paralyzed by yours truly.
And I think that's the only ones we actually have released so far, right?
Yeah, well, there's Prototype and there's UVGS, but Zark has plans to sterilize them a bit, to put it lightly. And he's already done a pretty good job at that. So, for those who were concerned about the inclusion of those two cars and what they could have potentially done to the class in terms of their dominance on tracks like Amco TT, we took those concerns into consideration, and we're dealing with it bit by bit. Once we have once we have enough cars, we can start properly testing it. The last time we tested it, we only had like 7 to 8 cars, and that was without the nerfs to UVGS and Prototype, so it was a bit balked, I'd say.
Yeah.
But go on.
Do you know how many cars we have ready right now?
Well, I'm still paralyzing another one of Zark's cars right now, which is, I would say we have like 10, give or take, which isn't all that bad, I suppose.
Yeah, that's good enough for for the beginning at least.
Yeah. It could be worse. Could be the original Prugs class with only 7 cars. that was a fun time.
Speaking of Prugs, we might actually be reverting the Slugs and Prugs names to their original names being Amateur and Advanced, because the circumstances have changed quite a lot since we used those names, and it might make more sense to actually use the original names. So just don't be confused about that.
Well, people were already confused by the term Pro Slugs, so it is going to cause confusion, but eventually people will adapt to it.
Yeah. Well, aside from that, we are going to have a car skin spec update soon. It was supposed to come last month, but I waited a bit longer. So possibly this Sunday, actually, which should be before the podcast actually airs. So that should be it for now, I think.
Yeah, sounds good. And with that, we shall move on to our questions.
But before that, I also want to point out the soundtrack pack.
Oh yeah, I completely forgot about that.
I don't think we actually... it was actually released when the October podcast aired, right?
It was released before then, and we did make an announcement about the fact that the RVGL downloads will have that soundtrack instead of the original one. To just cover things, I suppose, legally.
Yeah, I think this is a good time to actually broach the subject of the fact that all the original Revolt content might eventually not be provided in the downloads, which means that the RVIO versions will just have custom content, perfectly playable, but you will need to include the original assets via whatever copy you happen to have of Revolt.
Exactly. I stated that in the forum post of the soundtrack project. When the project is done, we're going to distribute it through our website and package it with the game releases. And yeah, that's part of our roadmap to replace the content that is not owned by us with community-made content. So that's tracks, cars, all the menu graphics, sounds, and also the soundtrack.
One step ahead and one step each day.
Yeah, exactly.
Plus, some of the community soundtrack is actually really good.
Yes, indeed.
But again, that's a subjective matter. Most people will focus on the nostalgia and be like, "Wait a minute, this isn't the weird female singer, singing nonsense in my menu music."
Yeah, but I'd like to address one very important thing before I have to go. We've kind of taken like a monopoly in the Revolt community. Our website is the website to download the game, get content packs, and the racing schedule. We kind of never meant to offer the game in its original state. I just wanted, when I started the website, I just wanted the game to be playable so that people could get the game, meet up together, and, play the game with as little problems as possible, with as few problems as possible. And there are still other websites where you can download the game in its original state, but that's not really the objective of Revolt.io. And I think it's important that other websites or maybe other branches of the community evolve and maybe offer the game themselves, and they can take the stakes of having the website that is closest to the original or official website of Revolt, the game released in 1999. RVIO is just a place for the community that shows what's new, what the community is making of the game, and what it evolves into.
Yeah, RVIO pushes it forward, but it's up to another website or another community to sort of preserve the original assets, I suppose.
Yeah, they're not going anywhere. They're not being replaced. You can still play it. You can still host lobbies with the original game content. I mean, the soundtrack doesn't, impair the gameplay in any way. It's still compatible with all other versions. When we actually get around to replacing the cars and tracks, which requires more changes to the game's code, it's gonna look a little bit different, and we'll see from there what's gonna happen.
As far as the online races are concerned, the original assets aren't going to go away there. You will still be able to choose stock cars, and we are still going to race on stock tracks, just that you might not be able to see them if you don't have them installed.
Yeah. So yeah, with that out of the way, let's move on to our questions. This time for real. We've had a couple of questions given to us for this month. The first question, I can't really make out who submitted which question, because one person submitted a question twice. But yeah, the first question is, what are your favorite cars from all versions of the base game? If you were to reskin them, what would you make them look like? Would you even change them? My favorite would be Hummer, and there's nothing I'd change about it.
I assume all versions of the base game does not include anything custom. No. So with that in mind, I would actually say Hummer as well. But Hummer aside, there's also Aquasonic for me, which was my first ever favorite. And similarly, I wouldn't really change anything. Aside from maybe, I don't know, improving the quality, making the texture higher or the model higher poly slightly.
Which, in terms of Hummer, somebody's already done that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Also, by the way, Marv unfortunately has to go, so it's going to be just me and Saffron from now on.
And then number two. The second question, do we really need a remake of Revolt? Well, if you were sticking by earlier, you would understand that the answer is yes and no. Yes, we need to not use RV, like original assets. But on the other hand, no, because we can't really remake the assets either, because they still resemble the original works of what the Korean IP holders have the rights to. So, yes and no.
To answer this from a different perspective, though, leaving the legalities aside, what if the question could be, what do we really need a remake just to bring the assets of the game to more modern standards? I personally would say no to that, but at the same time, it might be nice. But again, we don't really need a remake.
On the other hand, a remake could mean many things. A lot of people associate the remake of a game with grabbing an older game and slapping it into a modern world with microtransactions, and pre-order bonuses, and season passes. So in that sense, in that context, I'd also say no. Our next question is, what if there are too much custom cars for online races? That is a subjective matter, and I'm not really sure what.
I think what I could say about this is that, well, I assume it actually refers specifically to the IO packs. In that regard, I personally am trying to keep the count of custom cars as low as we can, which is also why it's difficult to decide what new content to include, because including new content often means removing other content, so the pack doesn't overflow with cars.
But this year we've had so much good content, it's kind of impossible for the car pack to not sort of inflate in size.
Yeah. And
so
in the end, even if there was too much content, the only real issue would be the fact that it would occupy more space on your hard disk.
And rather too much content than too little, like we had years ago.
Indeed.
Our next question: are there any unexplored track concepts you'd like to see realized one day? Well, one of my personal mottos is, if you would like to see something that has been made before, do it yourself. That's what I did with Molten Caverns. But aside from that, I mean, there hasn't really been a top-tier school track made for the game. I know I've toyed around with a couple of ideas related to that, but never really got anywhere. My mind's very much blank where that's concerned, because the one I wanted to do the most, which was a lava track, I've done already. I suppose the theme could be explored a lot more. The track could be refined or redone. So yeah. What about you, Vic?
Personally, I have a couple of things in mind, and actually did start one team-based project based on a piece of artwork. The piece of artwork in question is something that depicts an upside-down city of sorts that's very dystopian, or cyberpunk, so to speak. And I myself am a big fan of anything that's dystopian or cyberpunk. And I don't think we have many tracks like that. Like, we have something like Greaseville, which shows a more ghetto side of a neighborhood, I guess. But that's not quite dystopian either, is it?
No. I would say, yeah, now that I think about it, I would say like a synthwave themed track that's like not overly simple, like Synthwave by Alex.
That as well would be really nice. Another thing that I would actually like is a circuit track, but not just any kind of circuit track. Because every circuit track that we have is usually either designed in such a way that you feel like you're driving a real car as opposed to an RC car. And secondly, you always drive around the circuit, but never around, like, off the circuit, in the parking spot or in the interiors.
What about an autocross circuit?
An autocross?
Basically, it involves both dirt and tarmac.
Ah, yes.
It's a good compromise, I'd say.
That is also a nice idea, because one of the biggest issues with the circuit tracks is that it's all just asphalt. And it doesn't have enough variety, in my opinion. But that's about it, really.
Yeah.
For
Our
now.
next question. Our next question is there going to be a Christmas-themed event like Halloween Carnival? Yes. All's Fair 6.
No. We are actually having... I was actually going to talk about this earlier, but since we had this question, I delayed it until now. Back in 2010, I actually hosted a sort of tournament called the Christmas Championship, where what we did was to... basically, we had a small team who worked on various Christmas-themed cars. And we just use those cars to race on winter-themed tracks. Basically, I want to bring that back for December, around Christmas. I don't think we are actually going to race exactly on Christmas. And what I want to do, what will be different in comparison to the Halloween Carnival is that the participants who want to create stuff will have to work as a team on multiple cars. So if you're interested in that, just let me know. I'll probably make an announcement soon about it. And join us on RV Workshop.
So, earlier this podcast, we were like, man, this is going to be All-Star 6. That other thing isn't going to happen. But no, it might actually be doable to do both, I suppose. If we have the All-Star in early December, and then have the rest of the month for the Christmas Championship, or the Christmas-themed event.
I actually talked with Marv briefly. I didn't actually know we wouldn't do All-Fair this month until today either. But I talked with him, and we could do All-Fair 6 in the first or second week of December, and the Christmas-themed tournament will be in the third or fourth week of the month.
Sounds like a plan.
So, shortly, yes, there's going to be a Christmas-themed event.
Our next question. How would you, if someone randomly started fixing a few bugs in the tracks and try to push it out, like update? Many people have tried pushing out these fixes for tracks. Most of them visual. I know the Italian community have done this for a couple of the stock tracks, like Torwald 1. But a lot of the purists would argue that no, keep things the way they are, because that would interfere with time records. So it's a very subjective matter, depending on how you look at it. I personally would say yes, I would be all for fixing tracks. But on the other hand, a lot of people wouldn't agree to it, because for the past 19 years, people are used to that stupid bump in the first chicane of Torwald 1. And if that were fixed, people would be like, oh man, this is weird, this is too easy. Also, did you know that Torwald 2 is supposed to be entirely carpeted?
Yeah.
And isn't. And I know for a fact that if it was patched to be carpeted, a lot of people would collectively lose their thoughts, to put it lightly.
Yeah, personally, I would be all in favor for delivering those fixes for the stock tracks, but again, it's probably not a viable solution, since many people wouldn't like it.
Yeah.
This question, though, is a bit unclear whether it's about the stock tracks or the custom tracks in the IO pack. And just in case the person who asked this referred to the latter, well, truth be told, we had a lot of people who submitted various fixes for the tracks, and we have already implemented them. So if you have anything in mind, bug fixes in particular, please feel free to send them to me, and I will implement it in the pack. If it has bigger changes, especially visual, it might require a short process of requesting permission from the author of the track, but otherwise there shouldn't be many issues.
And our last question is quite the question. What if there is a new community formed, and then said community becomes bigger than RVIO to the point where said new community becomes the main hub for RV players, but said community doesn't meet RVIO's vision of the game's norm, and the particular vision of said new community becomes the norm for every RV players across every community? Well, that might be an inevitability. empires rise and fall, and the same goes for online. The same applies to the online context. Like we all know that this isn't gonna last forever, but a new community that becomes better than the old one happens because the old one generally becomes complacent and starts taking things for granted. But I feel like we've been adapting quite a lot. Like, before RVIO, like, getting the resources you need to get started was very difficult. A lot of people would tell you very different things. Oh, use this version of RV. No, use that version. That one's better. And, oh, what ports do I open? This, that, and the other. Whereas RVIO has it in one place. And the biggest challenge for a community that would want to evolve themselves to be even larger than this, to push the community forward, would have to, one, have better infrastructure, and two, have, share a similar vision. I don't know, it's a very interesting question, and I don't know.
If it ever happens, I do not think it will also mean the death of Revolt.io, unless us, the administrators, don't feel the need to continue doing it. But I myself picture this situation as simply continuing to do what we do, and from my end, I would personally support such as a community, especially if it turns out to be better than what we are doing.
So long as it's inclusive and doesn't push out, people like me, and among other kinds of people as well. That's all the questions for this month, and that is all there is to talk about for this month as well. That's it for November. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next month. And remember, stay fresh, stay hydrated, and keep existing.
We are actually ending it like this time, because Alex is not here to do a better outro, so see you next time, guys.
Get well, Alex.